No one's policing their own minds more than an author. You spend a lot of time in your own head analyzing what you think about things. And a philosophy comes. You can't trample infidels when you're a tortoise. I mean, all you could do is give them a meaningful look. I don't believe in the war god of the Israelites. He's a bogeyman. Jesus preached the golden rule, by and large. Personally, I think the best motto for an educational establishment is, "Or would you rather be a mule?" Often I sort of work up and down the manuscript. I sometimes used to go ahead of myself to see what was going to happen next, to make certain it fits what was going to be happening soon. Siren voices tell me, you don't have to keep going on. And then you think, I'm a writer. What do? Sit there watching my wife clean up. I don't know. I like being a writer. The bravest person I've ever met was a young boy going through massive amounts of treatment for a very rare, complex, and unpleasant disease. I last saw him at a Discworld convention, where he chose to take part in a game as an assassin. He died not long afterwards, and I wish I had his fortitude and sense of style. Genius is always allowed some leeway once the hammer has been pried from its hands and the blood has been cleaned up. Writing is the most fun you can have by yourself. I am a great fan of science, but I cannot do a quadratic equation. I became a journalist at 17. A few hours later, I saw my first dead body, which was somewhat colorful. That's when I learned you can go on throwing up after you run out of things to throw up. Journalism makes you think fast. You have to speak to people in all walks of life, especially local journalism. Neither of my parents went to church, but they did everything that you needed to do to be Christian. That's something a Quaker would call an intimation of the divine. Sooner or later, we're all someone's dog. In the first book of my Discworld series, published more than 26 years ago, I introduced death as a character. There was nothing particularly new about this. Death has featured in art and literature since medieval times, and for centuries we have had a fascination with the Grim Reaper. I've got wide tastes, but I don't like jazz. I believe everyone should have a good death. You know, with your grandchildren around you, a bit of sobbing. Because after all, tears are appropriate on a deathbed, and you say goodbye to your loved ones, making certain that one of them has been left behind to look after the shop. Money is an unavoidable consequence, but it isn't the reason I write. If it was, I wouldn't have written any of the books, because advances in that field are small compared to what I've got now for an adult DW. You can't remember the plot of the Doctor Who movie because it didn't have one. Just a lot of plot holes strung together. It did have a lot of flashing lights, though. There was once a caustic comment from someone suggesting I was breeding a new race. Fans from different countries have married. Amazing things like that. I've been to some of the weddings. I went to one here the other day. A pagan ceremony. Previous generations understood about death, and undoubtedly would have seen a reasonable amount of death. Once you get into the Victorian era, you might well have seen the funerals of many of your siblings before you were very old. It seems sensible to me that we should look to the medical profession, that over the centuries has helped us to live longer and healthier lives, to help us die peacefully among our loved ones in our own home without a long stay in God's waiting room. It's not morbid to talk about death. Most people don't worry about death. They worry about a bad death. It occurred to me that at one point it was like I had two diseases. One was Alzheimer's, and the other was knowing I had Alzheimer's. I don't think about the end game. I've got lots to occupy my mind. It's the rage that keeps me going. I don't think about the end game. I've got lots to occupy my mind. It's the rage that keeps me going. In all seriousness, people think that it's the ideas that are important. Well, everyone has ideas all the time. I tend to write mine down and remember them, but at some point you have to apply the bum to the seat and knock out about 65,000 words. That's how long a novel is. I'm not really good at fun to know human interest stuff. We're not celebrities whose life itself is a performance. Good or bad or ugly, we are our words. They're what people meet. What is normal? Normal was yesterday. If you lose a leg, one day you're hopping around on one leg. So you know the difference. I don't really plan. I'm almost intuitive about things. I do not, in fact, use many puns. Certainly there are far fewer than people believe. But I suspect the ones I do occasionally use tend to hang around in people's memories for a while. I think it does Discworld good if I don't write about it all the time. Sometimes you have to get it out of your system. I got into science fiction by being interested in astronomy first. By the time you've reached your 60s, you do know that one day you will die, and knowing that is at least the beginning of wisdom. Mind you, the Elizabethans had so many words for the female genitals that it is quite hard to speak a sentence of modern English without inadvertently mentioning at least 3 of them. For an author, the nice characters aren't much fun. What you want are the screwed-up characters. You know, the characters that are constantly wondering if what they are doing is the right thing. Characters that are not only screwed up, but are self-tapping screws. They're doing it for themselves. I particularly admire our Mark Twain and Jerome K. Jerome, who wrote in a certain tone of voice which was humane and understanding of humanity, but always ready to annotate its little foibles. I think I'd lay my cards down on that and say that it's that I'm trying to do. Plot exposition that can be gently wound out by the authorial voice and internal monologue of a character in the length of a page has to be delivered in a matter of seconds on the stage. I regarded finding I had a form of Alzheimer's as an insult and decided to do my best to marshal any kind of forces I could against this wretched disease. I have posterior cortical atrophy, or PCA. They say, rather ingenuously, that if you have Alzheimer's, it's the best form of Alzheimer's to have. It cannot be said often enough that science fiction as a genre is incredibly educational. And I'm speaking the written science fiction, not Star Trek. Science fiction writers tend to fill their books, if they're clever, with little bits of interesting stuff and real stuff. Knowing that you are going to die is, I suspect, the beginning of wisdom. I am certain no one sets out to be cruel, but our treatment of the elderly ill seems to have no philosophy to it. As a society, we should establish whether we have a policy of life at any cost. The New Testament, now, I quite liked. Jesus had a lot of good things to say. And as for his father, he must have been highly thought of by the community to work with wood, a material that couldn't have been widely available in Palestine. There are things around, and I know where they can be got quite easily, but I quite like waking up to the sunshine. My advice is this: for Christ's sake, don't write a book that is suitable for a kid of 12 years old, because the kids who are 12 years old are reading books for adults. I read all of the James Bond books when I was about 11, which was approximately the right time to read James Bond books. I have, before now, waited for a pen to perform a macro. I mean, I wouldn't pay more than a couple of quid to see me, and I'm me. I didn't go to university, didn't even finish a levels, but I have sympathy for those who did. I think I would like to go into modeling. Of course, I don't know how to do it and wouldn't be any good at it if I did. So I'm going to employ someone to walk the catwalks on my behalf. It would still be me, of course. I know 3 people who have got better after a brain tumor. I haven't heard of anyone who's got better from Alzheimer's. The ideal death, I think, is what was the ideal Victorian death. You know, with your grandchildren around you, a bit of sobbing, and you say goodbye to your loved ones, making certain that one of them has been left behind to look after the shop.